I've never, ever in my 25 years in public office have seen any type of dysfunction, disorganization as you are seeing right now today.
Chicago is a circus, and I'm not lying. Not just the people of Chicago. I'm not talking about that. People of Chicago are beautiful, because I don't want to come out there and gunshots! Just joking. Y'all know I like to laugh sometimes. But the state government of Illinois and the city of Chicago is an absolute joke. And if you ever thought that Lori Lightfoot was a terrible mayor, think again. And she was awful, by far. But as the old saying goes, it could always get worse. And it did. Brandon Johnson is the current mayor of the city of Chicago. And do you know what he did before? He was a teacher. In fact, he was really popular within Chicago public school system. And that brings us to this topic today. How is it that somebody who comes from the Chicago public school system is also against them? Rewind! Chicago is also $1 billion in debt. And of course, we know why that happened. It's the migrant crisis. Chicago declared itself as a sanctuary city, which left a lot of Black Chicago in the cold, literally. The West Side and the South Side saw a lot of their neighborhood crown gems turn into migrant status shelters. And well, we know that Brandon Johnson didn't give the whole order for the migrant crisis because it came from the federal government, but he did a very poor job in handling it. And that's why the city is in $1 billion of debt. Well, let's get back to the Chicago public school system. It's a mess. You want to know why? The entire school board resigned.
Messages left for the school board president and multiple board members were not returned today. And so we haven't heard directly whether they resigned in protest or perhaps were forced out. Regardless, this action unsettling to many in the district. On the near west side, CPS families reacting to the news with surprise and confusion.
Why? That's it. Why?
It potentially has ramifications down all the way to the student level. It'd be great to know what exactly happened behind the scenes.
The announcement that the entire 7-member school board will be stepping down at the end of the month came in a joint statement with Mayor Brandon Johnson, who appointed them, and who will now select interim members until a new board partially elected in November takes office in January. Their statement saying laying a strong foundation for the shift is necessary to serve the best interest of students and families.
They're resigning. Maybe that's the message they're sending to say, hey, look, we're not going to come under the thumb of whosoever. If we can't do the job right, then we might as well resign.
The board's departure comes after it declined to take action to fire CPS CEO Pedro Martinez, who Mayor Johnson wants out, in part because Martinez refused to take out a short-term high-interest loan to help pay for a new teacher's contract. Those talks have now stalled.
CEO Martinez was trying to be fiscally responsible, and the fact that this was done in some kind of coup attempt in order to force him out so they take a high-interest loan, that's really sad for our city.
Martinez in a statement saying, please know that regardless of the makeup of the Board of Education, my team and I remain focused on the work. Supporters of the mayor say he has the authority to appoint a board that will act on his education agenda.
Now there's a war going on with them. All 7 resigned. He has a big beef between the CEO of the school system there, which is Pedro Martinez. So he has to appoint a whole other 7 people to, do this job that the board just resigned to do. But stop the show. Well, know what's funny? He appointed these original 7 people in the first place. But remember when I said Chicago was $1 billion in debt? Just wait, it actually gets better. A few days ago, this particular news broke out.
And amid a budget crisis and a swirl of controversies, NBC5 Investigates has learned that Mayor Brandon Johnson has signed a $100 million contract extension for Favorite Healthcare staffing.
Now, that's the Kansas-based company that operated the city's migrant shelters for 2 years. NBC5 Investigates' Bennett Haberly is joining us now with what the mayor had to say about this. Bennett?
Well, Alex, we try to get some clarity on this, but the mayor sidestepped our questions about why this $100 million contract extension was necessary. Instead, he talked about how his administration has saved Chicagoans money and created jobs. Since August of 2022, Favorite Healthcare Staffing has been paid $291 million to staff the city's migrant shelters through a mix of city tax money and federal funds. The company's been criticized by alders for exorbitant hourly rates between $50 to $156 per hour. And our own investigation last year showed the company routinely billed the city 84 hours per week per employee. Johnson has repeatedly said his office saved money through lowering those rates. But since April of this year, the city has been evicting migrants and closing shelters. There are nearly 10,000 fewer migrants in shelter now than there were in January. And with the city facing $1 billion budget deficit, that led us to ask Mayor Brandon Johnson about this contract extension. How do we do that amid this budget crisis when there are fewer people in shelter? How do we justify that expense?
So we've saved the taxpayers over $200 million based upon the work that we've done. Over $200 million, while still investing on the west and south sides of the city of Chicago. That's what I promised to do, was to invest in people, and that's exactly what we're doing.
But as it relates to Favorite, I mean, we're saying we can't afford one controversial company, but we can afford extending them another $100 million when we have fewer people in shelter. How do you explain that?
There's a reason why. Well, there's a reason why there's actually less spending in sheltering right now. There's less spending. We have spent $70 million less.
Stop the cap.
So $1 billion in debt. He signs a contract with Kansas-based company Favorite Healthcare Staffing. Now, Favorite Healthcare Staffing is this overpriced staffing agency that's managing, migrant shelters in probably the city of Chicago, and it may be in other places too. So they're getting a lot of money. Some people are making, as you saw, between $50 to $150 an hour with overtime. So imagine if you're working in those migrant shelters right now, you are getting rich. You're doing very well. But where does that leave Black Chicago? First of all, we know what predicament it leaves Black Chicago. But the situation is, where does it leave the future Black leadership of Black Chicago? And this is what we're talking about. Because the Democratic Party are setting up Black leaders to fail, and fail miserably. One of the things I like about college football programs is that they have a lot of facilities there. Now, not every top prospect will make it, but if you go to Oklahoma, you go to Texas, you go to Florida State, you go to Notre Dame, you go to Michigan, you go to USC, it's a far better chance that you can make it to the NFL for the fact that you get exposure and you get good coaching. And a lot of that good coaching and playing against top talent will allow you to be ready for the next level, because people are actually invested into your future because you're doing well is invested in their future. USC wants as many people to go to the NFL because their program makes more money and more people want to come to the school. Look at what's going on right now with the University of Colorado in Deion Sanders. Because he's there, now more people are taking an interest in the University of Colorado, and everything has soared. Their merchandise is being sold more, their tickets have gone up, everything goes up. But that's because you have better coaching and better opportunities for players. And as the school is doing good, so do the players. Now, stick with me. The same thing goes for Democratic Party candidates or any Republican Party candidates, however you want to do it. The better your candidates are doing in cities, the more likely people want to vote for those candidates. In most Black Democratic cities, they vote blue no matter who, but you're starting to see people become very disgruntled with this. And that is because the Democratic Party sets up Black people to fail. The same thing with Mayor Eric Adams and the migrant crisis. New Yorkers are going to blame Eric Adams for the migrant crisis. But it wasn't Eric Adams who wanted the migrant crisis there in New York City. It was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that wanted the migrant crisis there. And they're going to get off like scot-free. When Kamala Harris runs for president, she's going to act like she didn't have anything to do with the migrant crisis. But she did. But when these Black leaders have to answer for these mistakes that somebody else put on them, they're the ones that get their career-ending injuries. And like Lori Lightfoot will never become mayor again. And neither will Brandon Johnson. Eric Adams, he's finished, right? Now, it could be from some things on his own, but he was set to fail in the beginning. So if Black leadership is set to fail from the beginning, then Black Democrats are also set to fail from the beginning. And we have to understand that. We are set to fail no matter how high you go in the Democratic Party. It's just what it is. Blacks are set to fail. And if we don't understand that, and if we keep voting blue, no matter who, we're going to continue to fail. And you know who gets robbed? Your kids. Your kids get robbed of an education. Think about this. You live in the city of Chicago. You're a tax-paying citizen, and your whole school board quits. That means your knowledge, your skill, all of that, your curriculums could be in complete danger because your school board is gone. That's the last thing you want, is instability in your public education sector. But not only that, there's been some issues with the health sector. Remember, they had measles there with the migrant crisis. So that put a strain. And so now you're talking about all of these issues as a tax-paying citizen that your kids are now suffering, especially in the Black communities and around the West Side and the South Side, where you already have lower funding and lower results and lower productivity. Then what are your chances of your kids getting to the University of Illinois or Chicago State or some of the better schools like University of Chicago? It all dwindles down hopes because you don't have an experienced institution in education. So then your kid can't make as much money. Your kid might be forced into a life of crime. And as we know in Chicago, gunshots! So now you're set to fail too, and you did nothing wrong but be a hardworking tax-paying citizen in the city of Chicago. Is it fair to you? No, but that's what happens when you support stupidity, which we've been doing in the Black community. We are set to fail. You need good leadership at the top. If Black leadership can't lead the cities because they're doomed to fail, you are also doomed to fail. And you can't really overcome that as a collective, can you? So guys, what do you think? It's your boy O'Shea Duke Jackson back at it again with another episode here of Fair Use. I really appreciate you guys for all that you do. Subscribe, hit the bell. We're out.